Man, that was a tiring Christmas. Worth it, but tiring.
Yeah, Dean Sealer's been napping since Thursday. He's loving that duck hat.
Yeah, definitely worth the cash for it. What does the Imperium call its currency again? I can't recall. Don't really care either, to be honest.
So, what's the plan for today?
Well, I got my hands on a Final Fantasy XIV TTRPG book, and boy, this is, very rough and not well made.
Wait, didn't you already review this game?
I reviewed the starter box, which less told about how character creation works and more how the game works. So, I'm going to talk about the book itself, touching on actual character creation, but not much for a very particular reason. We'll more be reviewing the book itself and the game as a whole. So, I want to point out that this book, the first 50 pages of it, talk about the names of certain characters of certain races. It then goes in for another 10 pages about the history of said races. This stuff I'm talking about so far is the character creation section. Character creation starts on page 17, and all of what it talks about is cosmetics stuff, none of which is really important to a TTRPG, but is in a video game to a degree. The character creation stuff doesn't actually say anything about characters, just some minor stuff that's all in background, except for explaining the character sheet, which is actually a good thing this book does. Profiles is in chapter 3, and it starts talking about titles and naming conventions starting on page 22 there. The most mechanical things in this list are the profile traits, which seem to be some roleplay information that can actually affect some gameplay stuff. I'm not going to touch on this too much, I'm just going to point out that it may give you some combat boosts in very specific situations. I'm okay with that, but these things won't come up in a vast majority of situations, especially given this game seems to expect you to choose these things at random entirely, because you roll various different dice to take various different parts of one trait. Chapter 4 is on page 47, and it's about the races. And what does it talk about? Racial history. It's not even a lot. I think every race gets one page and a few paragraphs, and then there's a bunch of other allied races at the very end. But who really cares about the sprites and Moogles' history in Eorzea? Sure, if this game worked like any other TTRPG, you would care. But in this one, it works exactly like the MMO, which I should point out is an excellent MMO, but it's not a good TTRPG if made in the same way to work with the same mechanics. So, where do we get to actual character creation? Chapter 5, Jobs. You start at level 30, so you skip the classes in the game. This chapter starts on page 60, and it's got 6 pages just talking about the lore of the jobs, though this bit does talk about the basics of tanking, healing, and damaging, and the types of damaging, while also talking about the various different resources and role-specific resources. Now, the writers of this TTRPG said they do plan on having all jobs available, including gathering and crafting jobs, which is the most insane thing for a TTRPG, but whatever, we'll ignore that, because they're not really in this game yet. What are the jobs available at the moment? We've got, in order that the book puts them in, Paladin, or Knight as I prefer to call it because the Japanese name literally means knight, Warrior, Dark Knight, White Mage, Scholar, Astrologian, Monk, Dragoon, Ninja, Bard, Machinist, Black Mage, and Summoner, with their pets right after. If you know the game, you'll know that this means there are 3 tank classes, 3 healer classes, and the rest are damagers, with 3 being melee, 2 ranged, and 2 magic. This part about classes actually has the actual stuff that you need to know, but there's a bit of an issue with it. You first choose your class. What, did you expect me to say something else? No, you're done. That's your entire character creation. Time to play! No, seriously, you're done. Gear is up next, but this is essentially all you need to do. You don't go up level by level, but instead go by phases at level 30, 40, 50, 55, and 60. Your stats are all predetermined, but I'm hoping the gear you get will make some changes. I doubt it, because this TTRPG is not as complex as the MMO. So, looking at items, it seems as though there are 3 tiers of shops: traveling merchants, small carriages or settlements, and major city-states. Apparently, your buying power is not tracked through actual gil, but instead as a category of, quote, fortune, ranging from 3 to 6. It looks like the GM will essentially tell you if you are capable of buying the thing you want to buy. 1 weapon, 1 set of armor, wait. You don't buy weapons and armor. That's predetermined for you by your role, your job, your class, whatever you want to call it. So it is just a stupid cosmetics choice. And it's quite literally just a cosmetics choice. I wrote in the script one thing only to realize something as I kept writing it. Hell, the starter box brought up player size categories, but that's not in the book. They removed player size categories, so Lalafell and Rogadin are in the same classification. You can blame 5th edition for that happening, because it basically did the same thing where a small sized gnome has the same sort of capabilities as a large size ogre. But there's a little paragraph about making your own gear here. It's about potions and elixirs and food, which I think was intended with the assumption that the crafting jobs being in the book at this point, but they are not. It just says you'll use downtime to make whatever the GM lets you. You can also use said downtime, or your money, to augment your gear, which apparently is not to be confused with materia, though they might be the same thing. I don't really know. I can't really find materia in this book. But there's several different augments that you can upgrade stats for a single dungeon run, which is what this game is based around. You can also get minions, mounts, and special mounts that do other things too. Each of the minions can give a little buff to you in various different things. Mounts are primarily a cosmetics thing, and there's a few special things they can do, but special mounts do have actual things they can supply, often a random little buff. Then it goes into combat, which is a whole kettle of worm, and it is pages after pages just on how combat works, from the various hypotheticals to actual mechanics. But there's something I noticed. There's a part of this book that tells the GM what happens when an enemy hits certain HP percentages. Well, it more suggests how to describe the situations, and the first line for 50 and 10% is the enemy's HP gauge has turned yellow or is flashing red, as though your character should be able to see the heads-up display. And this little bit really does give my whole opinion on this TTRPG. It's not a TTRPG. It's a video game wearing the mask of a TTRPG. The entire game is built around the dungeon running, and the encounters are built around the idea of taking the video game and making it a tabletop dice game. I can't even rate this game because it's not a TTRPG. When reviewing the starter box, I mentioned that it wasn't the full thing, that I was missing some information, but the amount of information I was missing was only 2 levels and some questionable gear because I can't find weapons and armor in this, because it doesn't exist in this. The abilities do the set amount of damage, but better or worse, the gear. Your gear is all consumables, not actual armor or weapons, when more than 1/6 of this book is built around how cosmetics work in a game where you imagine everything. I question the price tag on this book, which is $70 US. It's 322 pages long. That's it. And apparently, there's a bunch of things that have changed from the starter set, as there's a whole subsection at the end about these changes. That I actually like, I'll admit, because if you look at the Starfinder First Edition starter box versus Starfinder First Edition, they play very different. But then it goes into marker templates and tokens, all of which is for how abilities and enemies' abilities works. So this is a game that actively has a timed mechanics system like the MMO. It has actual marker icons for the gather together, spread out, and this area is getting slapped sort of mechanics. This is not a TTRPG. This is an MMO with a mask on. Shove off.